Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Journalists for Human Rights second webinar event sponsored by CTV News. I am Amara Bangura, and I work for the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative. In the first webinar in Information Saves Lives series last week, Siabulaila Mandela and Lisa Laflemme discussed JHR's work in South Sudan before and now that the world is dealing with a pandemic. And in case you missed part of that discussion, you still have an opportunity to go and watch it. It is on the JHR's Facebook page. And if you want regular updates on what JHR is doing in other parts of the world, just like the Facebook page. And you can also go onto the Twitter handle, it's at JHR News. And if you are on Instagram, don't worry, you won't miss it. Just click on Journalist for Human Rights. You will be right there. And before I forget, if you feel so inspired by the work that JHR is doing here in Canada and in other parts of the world, head to the page, and there is a donate button there. It's yellow, it's flashing there. Just click on it and donate. We will appreciate your support. Thank you so very much. And I have the pleasure of hosting today's event, where I'll be joined by the Honorable Karina Gould, Canada's Minister of International Development, and Rachel Polfar, the Executive Director of Journalists for Human Rights. Together, we will be discussing a new project that Global Affairs Canada and Journalists for Human Rights are announcing this morning, and how, in a time of pandemic, information has the power to save lives. This is something that I know firsthand as a JHR trainer, as a JHR trained journalist and trainer who covered the Ebola crisis in my country, Sierra Leone. I had two battles to fight at the time. One with the change in government policy and the change in medical information, but also the misinformation from the public in a time when we know our country needed accurate and timely information. This is why discussions like this are extremely important to me. Now, let us begin by welcoming Minister and Rachel. Thank you both for joining me. And I have to mention right at the top that the Minister will have to leave us around 11:35. So we'll get right into business. Minister, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
We'll get right into business. On the 11th of March, WHO made an announcement and they declared COVID a pandemic. And I'm just going to read you a short excerpt from that announcement. Director says, WHO has been in full response mode since we were notified of the first cases. And we have called every day for countries to take urgent and aggressive action. We have rang the alarm bells loud and clear. In response to this announcement, countries shut down their borders and others created policies to help beat COVID. And Canada is one of those countries. We took aggressive measures. And that brought us to what we now call the new normal. For Global Affairs Canada, what is the new normal?
It's an excellent question. And first of all, let me just say that, COVID has changed all of our lives in ways that we couldn't have imagined even 3 months ago. And certainly for Global Affairs, it's meant that, whether it comes to our projects on the ground, we've been in a lot of conversations with partners about how to pivot where appropriate to make sure that we're responding to COVID, but also how we can carry on our really important ongoing development and humanitarian activities, recognizing that those issues don't go away because of COVID. And in fact, they're actually exacerbated. So, like many people, Global Affairs staff have moved out of the office and are working in their home office, like me, and everyone on this
call. That's part of the new normal.
That's part of the new normal, but it's also meant that a lot of our partners have pulled their staff from the field. because they've come home as well. And so we're really relying, and I think it's important, on local partners in country who, are still present, and who know, the country, the region, the community that they live in. And so, that's been another change as well. Obviously, working virtually, it's not the normal to be able to, hop on a plane and fly across the world and go help partners on the ground. We just can't do that right now. And so everyone has had to think really creatively and differently about how we can continue to provide this really important programming in this new context.
Great. I'll get back to you in a minute. Rachel, what's the new normal for JHR? We've just heard from Global Affairs Canada.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's such a wonderful pleasure and honor to be on this webinar with both of you. I have so much respect for both of you and the work that you both do. And Minister, it's a real honor to host you. So thank you for coming on the webinar. Since the COVID crisis started, JHR has also been working across all programs from home. Since March 13th, we had to bring trainers back from the field. And we've pivoted our programs and our platforms to focus our work on helping to fight the pandemic. We started this in Canada, pivoting a project with Canadian Heritage that started through a series of conversations actually with Minister Gould on how to fight misinformation. And we have subsequently pivoted our Indigenous program, our existing Global Affairs Canada program, working in DRC with Syrian journalists in Jordan and also in Kenya, on how to ensure that journalists and the general public can spot fakes and verify facts before sharing them on social media. And with the Misinfo project that we delivered in Canada, we oriented it from March onwards 100% towards fighting COVID. And you know that well, Mara, because you were a trainer on that project and you did a fantastic job for us. We have also pivoted our work in South Sudan with Global Affairs Help, and we've been providing our partner journalists there with PPE, as well as training on how to cover the public health measures, but also fighting what World Health Organization has termed an infodemic of misinformation about this crisis.
Thanks. Okay, let me get to the minister. How does media development fits into Global Affairs Canada policy handbook in fighting COVID-19 globally?
Yeah, well, it's really important. And I think just building on what Rachel said, I mean, understanding the infodemic, right, that is out there, and unpacking that in terms of, there's so much information out there. Some of it is good and some of it is not so good. And making sure that there are local trusted partners and actors that can help clarify and tease through all of that information that's out there is really important. And one of the things that we know, and that you know better than anyone, Amara, based on your previous work, is that when you're in crisis, when there is a lot of chaos and confusion going on, people need to look to trusted information sources. And so in different parts of the world, that's different actors. That could be journalists, that could be public health agencies, it could be community leaders. And so making sure that, part of our programming is holistic, and it's ensuring that, we are supporting those actors that can be those trusted sources of information, so that people are taking adequate measures when it comes to public health, when it comes to safety, when it comes to protection, and really understanding what the latest information is to protect themselves and to protect others is important. And, especially I think back to, as you said, this is kind of the new normal. And I think we've all kind of gotten into a new rhythm of how we work. And, 100 days later, here we are, I come home and I come down the stairs in the morning and say to my son, to work, and he says, okay, have a nice day. But I've just gone downstairs, right? And, so we've all kind of gotten used to this new way of operating. But if you think back to March, in those first couple of weeks, really in the first 2 months, there was so much confusion swirling around. There was a lot of chaos as borders were shutting down, as businesses were closing, as people were changing how they were acting, and everyone was looking for the best information to make the decisions that was best for them, themselves, their community, their family. And so we really recognized, and for me, partly because of my former job as Minister of Democratic Institutions, really wanted to make sure that supporting those that were providing information had the resources, the tools, and the capacity that they needed to reach those most in need.
Interesting. There is a lot to unpack here, but I'll jump into this straight away. And I understand you have an announcement to make today in relation to most of these things that you've just said. And often when I hear these things, I go like, government is about to make an announcement. What should I expect? And I think at this point, this would be a good time to tell us about the announcement. What should we expect? Should I be excited? Should I be worried?
Well, I guess you'll have to decide for yourself.
Okay, I'll make the decision as soon as I hear about the announcement.
Coming from Sierra Leone.
Yes.
So I'm very pleased to announce today that we are providing $1.5 million for Journalists for Human Rights, Mobilizing Media to Fight COVID-19 initiative, which has as an objective to directly engage 56 journalists and directly reach their estimated audience of 22 million people with accurate and gender equitable media coverage on COVID-19 in Mali, Tunisia, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, Iraq, Yemen, and Mauritania. So that's our announcement.
Oh, okay. I can tell you how I feel about this, in a second. But I would love to hear that first from Journalists for Human Rights. What does this announcement mean to you? Like, how
does this affect our work? Well, for one thing, that's very exciting for me, Amara, and I think also for you, it means we're going back to Sierra Leone in a way. So I'm pretty happy about that. It means that we will have the capacity to equip the journalists that we have, in most cases, worked with before in some way, either through an extended project like the Sierra Leone project or in pilot work or needs assessments. We'll be able to equip them with the tools that they need in order to train both journalists and the general public on how to spot fakes and verify information. I'm really excited about this project. It's, necessity is the mother of invention. There's almost no travel in this project. We are hyper localizing our operations in what I think will be a really interesting innovation in the way that we deliver our work. It will be one of our greenest projects ever because there is almost no travel. And it will be an opportunity to link some of the amazing people that we worked with on our Canadian training program, including you, I hope, Amara, with some of the incredible journalists that we work with on the ground, and then train them in order to be able to train others on covering both the gender aspects of COVID-19, the human rights aspects, and ensuring that the right public health information is getting out and that misinformation is being debunked.
Great. This is getting to something else, but it's a great announcement, I must tell you. And when I hear Sierra Leone, I was like, yes.
Likewise.
We get there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our followers here would be interested. Why are we doing this now? Why is Canada investing in other countries in the fight against COVID? Minister.
Yeah, so an excellent question, and I'll give you two responses. The first one is that Canada truly believes that our global response is also part of our domestic response, right? We recognize that in order to protect the health and safety of Canadians, we have to work to protect the health and safety of people everywhere in the world. So that is really important, that we recognize that until everyone everywhere on the planet is safe, no one is safe, and that includes Canadians. The second part of it is that in order to combat COVID, people need access to good and accurate information. And we also value, as Canadians, the role of journalists and the independent role of the media, and recognize how important it is to have that trusted local voice delivering that information. I think of a recent trip that I took to the Democratic Republic of Congo and talking to workers on the ground who were dealing in the fight against Ebola, and they were talking about the fact that it was only when local community leaders, local journalists were the ones delivering the information that community members really started to trust the response. And so I think that when it comes to health issues, these are very, very scary and uncertain times, and people need to trust the information that they're getting, and they need to be able to trust the response to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their families. And so we recognize that it's part of what we need to do in order to help Canadians and the world move out of COVID.
Great. Now, can you also highlight just a little bit on the need to support traditional? I know you talked about the local media, but what's the relationship between supporting local media and as a policy from Global Affairs? Like, what are we aiming at here?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of things, because first of all, we're aiming at getting people the information from trusted sources, right? So that they can make informed choices and do what's best for themselves and their family. But the other part of it is by supporting local media, we're also helping to support democracy and citizens' engagement and activity and action with their representatives and with their governments. And that's something that's very important. And hopefully, that also means that we're advancing human rights, we're advancing gender equality, and we're advancing the role of civil society and citizens' agency in the decisions that are being made about them, for them. And so that is really critical and really important. And we know how important the role of media and journalism is to be that arbiter and to be that that method of transmission of information, but also to help make sure that that's translated into language that citizens can understand, and they can make sure that they're holding their governments to account. And I think particularly right now with a global pandemic, there are a lot of decisions that are being made very quickly by governments all around the world. And the role of media in, keeping track of that, informing citizens, asking tough questions is so crucial and so vital. And so that's why, for me personally and for Canada, it's important for us to support this work being done at the local level to ensure the voices, the rights, and the agency of citizens are taken into account.
Thank you so very much for this. And I know we had informed followers that you leave just about this time, and I'd love to respect that. So thank you so very much for taking your time to join us in today's discussion.
It's my absolute pleasure. And as I said, I saw firsthand how important this work was when I was in the DRC earlier this year. I know how important the work you did and your colleagues did in Sierra Leone and in West Africa in 2014 was for the response and for helping citizens understand and navigate and make informed decisions. So very pleased that I could be with you, very honored that I could have this conversation with both of you. And I wish Journalists for Human Rights much success in this massive endeavor that they are taking on. But I know that these are resources that are well spent, that are going to have a very important impact, not just on the ground, but for the global community. So thank you so much. And I wish you all the best. And I'm sorry that I have to run.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great. In case you are just joining us, we continue the discussion, and we just want to say thanks to the Minister for joining us. And we still have Rachel Pulfar here. She's the Director of Journalists for Human Rights. Minister, thank you. And yeah, Rachel, let's continue this discussion. There are many interesting things to unpack here. And
there are.
Yeah. First, I'd like you to comment on the power of the media or media development generally to address global issues like this pandemic.
Okay, well, I'm delighted to do that. But seeing as I'm a journalist myself, Amara, and I love turning the tables on people in interviews, I'm going to turn it right back to you and ask you a few questions. Yep, on the incredibly important work that you did leading the response to Ebola in 2014 in Sierra Leone, and also sharing some insights of the experiences you had working with us on our Misinfo fighting project.
Yeah.
Let's start with Sierra Leone. What were the main challenges, and why was the media so important in that moment?
Great. Well, during the Ebola outbreak, as many of us here know, it was a new outbreak in West Africa, right? Not everybody knew about it, and we didn't even have trained and qualified doctors to tackle that outbreak. We, like Sierra Leone, had only one hemorrhagic expert. And you imagine there is an outbreak like this. He was exhausted, right? And we had to bring in other doctors to help fight the virus. But also because it was a new outbreak, there were many issues of misinformation, and people created their own information because they didn't have the right one. And also because of, like I said earlier, the changing medical information and the changing government policies. When there is every day something or another thing comes up, people create their own information. So trying to create a balance, or when you are caught between that, it becomes a very difficult situation. And this is why local media is important, because I know it's a question that I asked you and I was hoping that you'd answer this. You'd find the approach often taken by international media is different to local media. International media would go and report it as a news item and leave. Yeah, local media will take the responsibility of providing their citizens with life-saving information. Like, this is what you need to do in order to stay safe. Yeah, so this is why local media is important. And the other important side of the international media is because they're able to bring it to a wider global audience.
That's right. So, and that's exactly what we're hoping to create with this project. We're going to be pairing Canadian misinformation trainers, Canadian journalists, Canadian experts with local journalists of your and other people's caliber. You happen to be in Canada at the moment, but we're hoping to work with you and others. We have an incredible network of journalists that we've worked with to develop this project, as well as that we will be tapping in order to do some of the training. Koloba Akoy in Lofa County in Liberia, Mustafa Demboya, who you know well, who was our senior trainer in South Sudan.
They're in South Africa right now.
Just being clear that JHR has a policy in our international programs of localizing our staff as much as possible, working with the most incredible journalists across the sector. And our goal here is to really ensure that they have the information that they need and the tools and the training and the support that they need to tell these critically important stories, to keep communities safe, to do the ongoing follow-up, to follow best practice when it comes to sharing information about a pandemic, to prioritizing the science, and to ensuring that people have the information that they need to keep themselves safe. And what I'm fascinated about with this project is that we're going to see through it the development of a network of trusted, credible local voices, to use the minister's phrase, all working together on different aspects of this pandemic and other kinds of coverage. And a longer goal beyond this project is to really work hard to network those journalists together so that they can work together, make common cause, tap into resources, and support one another to help themselves and help their communities through this process. So very exciting moment, very exciting time. And we're looking forward to moving ahead.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, but I have started receiving questions here. And the first question is directed right on to Amara. The person says, first question, what is the main difference you have seen between the Ebola outbreak versus the corona in Africa? That's a very interesting question, and I'll try to answer it as this way. First, the Ebola hit in a way nobody expected it. We didn't know about it. We were, like I said earlier, it was completely new. So, and we were very unprepared. Yeah. And then the outbreak hit. Like, there was a lot of misinformation. There was also just denial that things like this wouldn't happen. It doesn't exist. There were theories that it's either a witchcraft. Yeah. There are other theories such as, oh, this is political, or it's kind of like imported thing. So dealing with the misinformation is one, but also dealing with the denial is another thing. Dealing with these myths is one. But then the difference now with the COVID is, because we had that experience, there wasn't this much of a denial, because we know already that it happened, something happened previously a couple of years ago. Now there is this again. So now you just have to battle with the misinformation. There wasn't much denial. People were very prepared. Yeah. And I just have to say again, you realize that Sierra Leone is the last country in West Africa to confirm the COVID case. This tells you how people were already prepared in terms of what to do and what not to do, although COVID is also new. Another thing is, because we know already of this, is people practice some of the measures that were put in place during the Ebola. Like, we used to have what we call the ABC method. It's avoid body contact. Yeah. So when the corona thing, the COVID hits, people were like, oh, social distancing, we know it already. We call it avoid body contact, ABC. Yeah. When you see social distance, yeah, we know it already. So these are some of the differences. Yeah. I guess, I mean, Richard, if you have anything to add up to this.
So I would say that the key difference is Ebola is much more deadly, but it is you have to have contact with bodily fluids in order for Ebola to transmit. Whereas COVID is sneakier. You can have it and not know it. You can have it and be asymptomatic. You can have it and it can be transmitted to another person if you share the same small space for half an hour. Yeah. Which is why, if you look at some of the information coming out of epidemiologist surveys that the New York Times has been publishing, you see that, you know, the epidemiologists will happily socialize in a park, for example, but won't go into a restaurant because of the danger of COVID being transmitted in a small space over the space of a half an hour period. It's more contagious and it's harder to track. And that's why it's so important for there to be clarity on how people should be behaving through this time of lockdown and this phased process of reintroducing aspects of normal life.
Great. I have a second question here, and perhaps this is your question. This person says, how would you approach the gender aspect of COVID misinformation?
So that's a very important question and a critical issue. We are seeing that this COVID is having a massive impact on gender rights worldwide. We are seeing a situation where women are being put in lockdown with their abusers, and rates of domestic violence are going through the roof. We are also seeing a situation where women are being squeezed out of the workforce because when they're at home, they're shouldering disproportionate amount of the home care, child care, homeschooling, hygiene, and all the other things that go along with having to spend a lot of time at home in a small cramped space. So we are looking at ensuring that we highlight these gender impacts, that we work with women's rights organizations in all of the places that we've cited to ensure that the specific aspects, gendered impacts of COVID-19 are clearly understood and that people understand where they can get resources to help themselves in a situation where they're facing greater difficulties simply because they're a woman or a girl going through this pandemic.
And yeah, just to highlight one other important thing I'd like followers here to understand is in some of the countries where this new project is going to be implemented is in some cases, women are mostly the breadwinners. They are very much busy taking care of the families, taking care of the homes. And so most times in such situations, if information is not readily available for them, they are left behind in terms of understanding what to do, what not to do, because of the busy nature of their work. So this is why the gender aspect, filling that gap, is extremely important, and reaching them with this timely and accurate information is it's very important. Yeah. Yeah, I think we are almost up for time, and I'd see. Let me check if we have any more questions, and then we see what we can. Okay, I'm gonna ask you this. When we were discussing, you talked about the fight against misinformation this in Canada, and a project that we recently just concluded here. Can you just highlight some of the successes there in fighting misinformation here?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we worked with
It
youth.
was a big project. It was an important project, and many people said.
Yeah, it was. We worked with a network of 10 journalism trainers and 10 what we called media literacy trainers. And we worked, the journalists, we trained to train other journalists in their newsrooms on how to make misinformation and disinformation more part of their beat. We worked with Craig Silverman, a global expert on disinformation and misinformation, and also with Civics Canada, led by Taylor Gunn, to develop the media literacy curriculum, which was itself based to some extent on First Draft, which is based in New York. We will be continuing that work. We have secured additional funding from the Trottier Foundation of Montreal, and also 2 other foundations and McConnell Foundation, in order to move the project forward. We saw huge interest, especially when we put the program online. We worked to take all the travel budget and put it into online licensing and webinars and the rest of it. And we saw a uptick of almost triple our initial target of 500 people tuning in order to acquire the skills they needed to verify information online on social media and know that information is accurate before sharing it. That was the critical insight of this project, is working with social media users to change their behavior. We had outreach from a Texas hospital system to train all 5,000 of their staff on this methodology. We've had outreach from journalists in New York. We've had outreach from people who are concerned about the electoral integrity of the United States, wanting to work with us on aspects of this program. And we're looking at all of those, but we decided that our priority for the initial work that we wanted to do was training journalists within our existing networks in the Global South, in places like Guinea and Gambia and Sierra Leone, Mali, Iraq, Yemen, where the need is just so acute and so dire. And so we decided to prioritize those countries to start, and then we'll see. It's a methodology that clearly is desperately needed. It's desperately needed, and it works. And so
it's
we're looking forward. And it's green because it's all online. So there you go.
Great. Well, Rachel, thank you so very much for to this discussion. It's been great. Talking to you. It's
been wonderful, Amara. It's wonderful always to see you.
All those of our followers, thank you so very much. Before we go, I have to remind you again, if you miss part of this discussion, it will be on the GeoChart Facebook page. Go there, like the page. And if you're so inspired, there is a yellow button there that says donate. You can do that. I guarantee you it will be very simple. And you can also head on Twitter, and it's at GeoChart News. It's very simple. And it's the same for Instagram. It's Journalists for Human Rights. But it's all, I'm also there. It's Amara Bangura on Twitter. You can follow me as well, and Rachel. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to all those CTV News that supported this webinar. And thanks for joining us. We meet again for another webinar.